Hey, Sean.
How's it going, Howard?
It's going real good, man. We're sliding into season 2.
I know.
How about
It's
that?
nice, man.
It's surprising how fast it's gone.
It has flown by. Obviously, the friendship we have with Jason here with us as well, I think makes it easy. But we have been very, very fortunate, and honestly, we've had a lot of really, really good guests. And I think we've kind of covered like the gamut, of who we could talk to with this genre, I guess, of what our podcast is.
Yeah, I think so. We've had the police, we've had the criminals, we've had police that are criminals.
That is true.
We've had some attorneys.
Yes.
We've had all sorts of things. So hopefully we're going to continue that in season 2.
Absolutely. We will.
We got some amazing guests lined up. Hey, imagine that. Have you ever been distinguished as a super cop?
Within my own, my own mind, or actually from anybody?
Right. No. Has everybody ever put in writing Sean Larkin, super cop?
Absolutely not. No. But here, so I will say this before we introduced our fantastic guest we have today. So we all have to wear a name tag. You have to identify who you are.
Right.
Do you know what my name, my full name is?
Sticks.
Close. That's the one on my legal name, my government name, as they say on the streets. My government name.
What's your government name?
Sean Corey Larkin. So the initials are SC Larkin. And so when I would be at work and people would see SC Larkin, man, what's that? What's SC for? I would say Super Cop. I really would, man. I'd tell them Super Cop Larkin.
Okay,
So,
well,
okay.
we have someone who is distinguished as a super lawyer.
Okay.
She's done a whole lot of stuff during her 35-year career, including prosecuting pretty much any high-profile case that you have seen on television. I think that she has been either a consultant or helped with those cases.
Very nice.
I mean, she is distinguished as it comes in the field of law. One of the things she likes to do, she likes to represent police officers.
I'm a big fan already.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. So today we got Anne Bremner. How you doing, ma'am?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, and we do appreciate it. And, this is put out on YouTube. A lot of people just listen to it, on Apple or Spotify, whatever. But you have probably the best background that we've had. There's been a couple of guys, that had like a bar atmosphere, some pretty nice ones. But you've got the best backdrop. And actually, the picture you have back there, famous picture from the skyscraper, the Irish guys that are up there eating lunch and from who knows how high up. I actually had the exact same picture framed in my office before I retired.
Really?
I mean, I've had it
Really?
there. I think my kids gave it to me when they were much younger, but I had it in my office, same picture.
Did you have the fresh roses behind you as well?
That
the
I did
beautiful
not.
white fresh bouquet of roses.
That I did.
Did you know that picture? They're up there, they're smoking and they're drinking. Remember that? They're sitting up there having lunch, and one of them's got vodka or something, and someone else is lighting someone's cigarette. And I think it's at the top of the Empire State Building or Rockefeller Center. I can't remember, but
Rockefeller, if I remember correctly.
yeah, I think it is. But I think it's 1925. But I just love that picture. It's just a classic.
Yeah, OSHA would have a heart attack nowadays, probably.
I
But
Did she say something about drinking?
drinking.
They were drinking. Well, we're drinking too, and we, as Sean so elegantly put it, got bamboozled today, did we not?
We did. So, as everybody, our faithful listeners know, it's called Coptales and Cocktails, and we're going to have a great conversation for the next 45 minutes or so, but during that time, we are going to have a lovely beverage. And Howard was the one that reached out and made contact with Anne to be here on the show with us today. And the group text we had between Jason, Howard, and I, it's like, okay, what are we going to drink? It's always a topic of conversation. And it was a martini, not only a martini, but a Ketel One Martini. It was very specific.
Yes.
And who made this decision, Howard?
Our guest made a decision because you would make this decision.
Correct. So, Anne, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, I'll show you. I live in Seattle, so I'm drinking Rainier beer.
Okay.
Very famous beer. That's Mount Rainier out here in Seattle. Yeah, go ahead.
Lovely place. But it was your suggestion that we drink martinis. Do they not have martinis? They only have Rainier beer in Seattle? That's the only thing they have?
I suggested martinis. That you said what I like to drink. And I said a martini or a Rainier beer, Ketel One Martini. But I've never made a Ketel One Martini. I've certainly had my share. But
hey, guess who else hasn't
the best
made
I
one?
could do.
Guess who else has never made one? Howard and I. We have never even had a martini.
Yeah, we've had how many's?
Zero.
We've had zero
Zeros.
meetings, but
Zero. Okay.
We do have Jason here in
thank you.
studio. So Jason
Cheers.
he's got
Ah,
olives. So
Yeah, this
those
we
look
got,
perfect.
oh,
yeah, we got
Cheers.
this is booze. Cheers to you, man.
Cheers.
Oh,
Are they good?
tastes like alcoholism.
yeah, it's pretty strong.
This is
I just don't like
we
olives.
we
So
re- we
yeah,
review bourbon, and this would be bad bourbon.
okay. So, Anne, tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, Howard and I know some about you. We do know you originated in Oklahoma, and McAllister. Just for those listening, that is actually where our big prison is. But that's kind of what they're known for beyond that.
Right.
And now Anne. So, you ended up at Stanford Law, and how did you kind of go through all that?
I was born in McAllister. My dad's a physician. He was going through residency and internship. We were born all over the United States. There's 4 of us. And I was named for a young Native American girl he took care of with some other medical students and interns who had like osteomyelitis in every bone in her body. I mean, she had a treatment for like a year. Her name was Melanie, Melani, which is my middle name. And after we were in Oklahoma, we ended up in North and South Dakota, Kansas, at the Menninger Clinic, where my dad became a fellow. He's a psychiatrist, which is really, handy in a lot of ways, and it has been for a long time. And then it ended up where he grew up, which is in Washington State. He grew up in a farm in Linden, small town, and he decided to basically put roots down in Olympia, another small town. That's where I grew up. I went to Stanford undergrad, went to law school, and became a prosecutor, clerk for a judge, and then went into private practice. Pretty fast.
Yeah, that was pretty fast. You did it all in 1 year, I assume, right? That's part of the
Exactly.
super lawyer path. I asked
Super
her
lawyer path.
we got on about the Cape, and you said you didn't have one, but you were a King County prosecutor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell us about some of the time you spent doing that.
I did sexual assault cases and felonies, murder cases, and juvenile, you name it. I mean, every different kind of a case. I wore Laura Ashley dresses with cowboy boots. I had cowboy boots that had embroidered eagles on the front. I thought it looked really great. I had a judge once say, "Miss Bremner, I really like your outfits." I'm like, "I do too, they're just great." And I looked back, I found a picture from a case I tried that was in the paper, and it was so 80s, that was me in the prosecutor's office in the 80s. But it was a great experience, and it kind of set me up to defend police officers in private practice because I'd worked so much with police officers and admired their work so much.
Well, talking about it in the 80s, and you hit on it there about defending police officers, and we'll definitely get into that. But there's one thing that I found back in, I think it was 85, you actually prosecuted like a University of Washington police officer or something along those lines. Like one of the first type of cases for like some sort of like computer trespassing
Right.
or something like that. Obviously, computers were
New.
Yeah, brand new. Hardly anybody had them back then. And just the timing of when that case happened, and obviously a law enforcement officer. What was that case? What happened there?
He was keeping a database of women that he found attractive, and he was researching their private information. This is the best I recall. It was so long ago. But he, and then he would write notes on like printouts of information about them, about their bodies, like a nice whatever, a nice this or that. And so he was prosecuted for computer trespass because he was illegally using the computer to get into databases for his own reasons and not for law enforcement purposes. He was convicted, but it got reversed on appeal. And it was reversed basically by saying, well, he really kind of had unfettered access. I mean, keep in mind, that was way back then.
Right.
But it was basically like, well, this is his job. He can access these things. And there was nothing specific that would require that he not delve as deep as he did or use them for the purposes that he did. But it was so new. I mean, computers, I don't think I didn't know how to use a computer when I had that case.
Isn't this the guy that owns Tinder now?
Could be.
Well, and so, for law enforcement databases now, obviously we have access to a lot of different pieces of information. And, when you basically get certified on all these different things like NCIC or whatever it is. You have an annual
Hmm.
verification that you have to do. And one of the things that's one of the questions you have to go over every single time in the true false section, it's talking about basically everything that you use has to be done strictly for investigative purposes. You know, it can't be done for personal.
Right.
But we had an officer here in Tulsa, I don't know, at least a decade ago. And that's kind of what he was doing. He was seeing pretty girls, driving cars, and he was running their
Uh-huh.
license plates, and he would find out an address, and then he was showing up at their house, knocking on the door, and
Wow.
he wasn't assaulting them or anything. He was just trying to use this as a way to introduce themselves to these girls. But
Right.
he would show up and say, "Hey, we got a 911 hang-up call from your house," and evidently he had done this a handful of times, and nobody knew about it until he showed up at a girl's house that did not have a landline.
Oh,
Cell phone only. And then
Oh,
she's like,
wow.
something's not right here. And then, every single time, obviously, when we log into it's called an MDT, your mobile data
Hmm.
terminal in your computer, it's logged in strictly to Sean Larkin. So every single thing you run in there, there is a record of it, and it's permanent. And so they were able to start going back through and looking at the different stuff this guy was doing. Like I said, there weren't any sexual assaults or anything like that. He was just taking information, pretty girls in cars and trying to go out and talk. And those are the guys that shouldn't be cops. Clearly,
right.
Right.
he ended up actually resigning. So he didn't get. I mean, he was going to get fired, but he resigned.
I wonder if he sounds a lot like the one that I prosecuted, and I don't remember if he resigned or was terminated, but I think he was terminated. I don't know what happened with an appeal for his job, but pretty scary. I mean, it's very similar to what you just described.
Yep.
Well, during your time as a prosecutor, you said you dealt with a lot of sex crimes, and I imagine that's pretty difficult to deal with. This was pretty early in your career, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that I guess that's showing the underbelly of society immediately to you, correct?
Correct. And I was in my 20s when I started there. And it was a lot of just eye-opening, horrible cases. The worst were the child abuse cases, of course, in her family. Very few that were stranger danger cases. That was more adults. Back when I was there, we had the first sexual assault unit, I think, in the United States in King County. And that's where I worked with King County Prosecutor's Office. So there were some real trailblazers that were my supervisors. And they used to call our group the Vengeant Women's Brigade because we were mostly women in that unit back then. And it's not the case now, but we were pretty, aggressive, and we were pretty purposeful in getting justice, especially for the kids.
As you should be. I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that we can agree on as society. We're supposed to protect children.
Exactly. Exactly. And I know it was interesting with this Ghislaine Maxwell case with this juror that is out, talking and didn't disclose supposedly during jury selection having been a victim. I had a serial rapist that I prosecuted. He was attacking women near Harborview hospitals. They walked to work in the morning, attacked, I think, 5 or 6 women. Tried that case. He was convicted, and I had a juror in that case do a similar thing, basically say, not disclose something during jury selection, and then talk about it in the jury room, like putting in extrinsic evidence. And that case got thrown out.
Mm.
It was retried. I mean, I can go on the rest of it, but think about that too when you're looking at like Ghislaine Maxwell and child victims, and then what can go wrong in a case after conviction. So I had those kinds of frustrations, at least in that case, when I was a DA in King County.
Well, when you guys did retrial that case, did you end up with a conviction?
Yes, but then wait a minute, we hung the jury, we got a conviction, it got overturned, it got thrown out because of the juror, I got reinstated, it got reversed on appeal. I went to private practice defending cops. It was tried a third time and a jury hung.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really frustrating, and I don't know where he is today.
Well,
But yeah, go ahead.
you brought up something interesting about like jury selection. That's a fancy word, isn't it? Called vodar, or what is what
The
is
Texans call it the Texans call it vaudire.
Or die.
We use the French in Seattle, and that's voir dire.
voir dire? And that's
Right.
Here it's Vordire. Yeah. That's, here in
Yeah,
Oklahoma,
you're
it's Vordire.
You're Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, it's
voir dire.
Vordire.
Well,
Right.
can you translate that
After
into
a quick
actually
break, we'll
English
be
and what
right
that
back
means?
with
And
more
I
cocktails.
guess
It means
that's a pretty
it means
important-
two things. It means to speak the truth or to see to speak. It literally means to see to speak. It means you see the jurors and then to speak with them. So voir is see and dire is speak, essentially. That's the best I know in the French translation, but it's basically jury, deselection, that you're trying to weed out the jurors that are going to be problematic for your case. I've never really, I had a case during the pandemic where I tried. It's the Cox case where the children were murdered by their dad, and CPS, Child Protective, had not protected the children. I had the best jury I ever had. They awarded us nearly $100 million for that case during the pandemic. And I've never disbelieved jurors. I love jurors. I love jury selection. I love everything about our system. But I especially do with that case in the pandemic, where the jurors sat in an open court. They were recessed for months. They all came back, and they reached a verdict protecting children, because they were really part of something bigger than themselves. Like you said, child protection. So I don't want to demean the process by saying you're deselecting, but simply to say that it's a process, not exactly selection, but jurors are great. I love juries.
Well, can you give us a little details about that Cox case for people who aren't familiar with that?
Sure. Susan Cox Powell went missing in Utah 11 years ago now. She's never been found. Her husband said that he had taken the kids camping at midnight. They were diapers 2 and 4 in a snowstorm. And then his wife disappeared during that. She was never found. He moved with those kids to Washington State. He took out $3.5 million on insurance on her. Her blood was found in the house. He was drying a couch with fans. He cut off childcare checks, knowing that she wouldn't be coming back. He wouldn't be coming back. He moved immediately to our state with the kids, and he was a primary suspect, but never arrested in the homicide. There's also domestic violence in their marriage. And when he got here, the kids were taken into custody, CPS custody, because they raided the home based upon the murder case, found nooses hanging from the ceiling, picture of a woman on the wall with a sword up her vagina, pornography in all the computers.
Jesus.
His brother walked around naked or in a diaper. The kids lived there. CPS took them. They later, after that, like 46 red flags about Josh. He killed family pets. He tried to kill himself. He tried to kill his mother. I mean, I could go on and on. I knew all of this. All of it was documented. They tried to give him a psychosexual evaluation and a polygraph, which of course he doesn't want a polygraph, right? Because he killed his wife. And then they put him back in the house with the kids. He killed them with a hatchet, and he set the house on fire.
Jesus.
And that's that case. And that's this jury during a pandemic said, this can't happen to kids anymore.
No.
You can't do that. And so it was very important to us. We did have 46 red flags. Each one of them the CPS ignored, and they put those kids back with Josh.
What did CPS have to say for themselves?
Oh, the usual. He was not arrested for the murder. He loved his kids. By the way, the kids were afraid of him. They in visitations were fearful. They said things like, "Mommy's in a mine." They drew pictures of their mom's body in the trunk of a car. Things like that. I guess what they were saying is we can't predict when a father's going to kill his kids.
Oh, you
That
can
our
pretty
posi-
much predict that one.
What?
Someone, I mean, anybody can predict that. That's an easy one.
And what about him on the prosecution side of things? What's happened with that case?
Well, he killed himself and he killed his kids.
Okay.
They suffered for at least 15 minutes, probably more like 20, and they were conscious through all of it. That's why the verdict was so high for their pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Of course, the case is dead now. There's a podcast called Cold that won a Murrow Award about this case that I'd recommend to your many listeners and viewers, because I think it's the kind of case we need to really learn from and say, never again, not just in my state, in any state, when you look at child protection by the state, let's make sure it's child protection, and that you don't just look at reunifying families at any cost. You protect the child.
Yeah. Howard in the medical profession and in the nursing world, and people with substance abuse, drugs, we'll just, here in Oklahoma, methamphetamine and
Oh yeah.
those are a huge problem and things like that. And just being a cop through the years, you see, you get called out for, for a while we had meth labs everywhere. So we were constantly running search warrants on houses with meth labs, and you'd find kids in there. The kids would, be taken at the time. Their blood's going to be tested, and they would show, substance in their system because they're in these houses
Right.
where the lab was. and it's mind blowing. It's disappointing. It's sad at the number, just as you said, family. They just, we wanted the families back together. We want the families back together, and they're just, these kids get put back into these horrible situations over and over and over again. And that doesn't even count the physical or sexual abuse at times that's happening as well. It
Well,
blows you away.
you also had that verdict in Oklahoma, because I just was at a seminar with the Texas lawyers in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, with the lawyer in Oklahoma that handled your drug opioid case that just got reversed.
Mhm.
That Oklahoma was a test case on going against the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh yeah, it was a huge amount of
Huge.
money. Yep, and
Yeah.
that flip. Yep,
Yeah. So
happened.
Huh.
And one other thing to go back when you were talking about just on the jurors, voir dire and stuff like that, as we say in Oklahoma, during the pandemic, I had a trial just before I retired. And here, our mandatory mask mandate here in Oklahoma, or at least Tulsa County, had stopped. I don't remember what the date was, whatever it was. But it was interesting being in this trial. It was for a shooting case, and I was the case agent. So I got to sit with the prosecutor throughout the whole voir dire, the whole case and stuff like that. And seeing the jurors, as we went through the several days of voir dire for this thing, of those that were wearing masks and those that weren't, the potential jurors. And even because it was a shooting case, or it was just kind of even the types of, or the questions that were asked and the answers you would almost get, because the mask thing, and we don't talk politics, it just has become such a political thing in some areas of the country, and who's wearing one and who's not. And it was just interesting, honestly, sitting in there and watching the questions and the different answers. You can almost kind of pinpoint some of the answers you were going to get strictly based off of what the question was and whether someone was wearing a mask or not.
Right.
It was kind of interesting. Just you bring up talking about during the pandemic, something like that. So
that's fascinating.
So we know you like to protect children, which, man, big high five. We'll drink martinis to that for sure, even though these things are weird. I don't see how you drink them all.
You don't like them?
Terrible.
Have you tried this brown liquor up on the wall? It's real good. So we like that a lot.
Okay.
You also like to protect something else we like a lot. Police
officers.
So how'd you get into that?
Well, when I left the prosecutor's office, I interviewed with a number of firms, but the one that I wanted to go to was the firm back then that represented the Seattle Police Department. And I was with them for decades. So we did police cases. I was a responder to police officer involved shootings and deaths. And we did that. I did that for many years. So whether it's a shooting or, any other type of officer involved death, I would go to the scene and respond with the officer. And then we had inquests out here to determine the facts and circumstances of an officer involved death. So we had those hearings, and then the civil cases. So I've defended officers. I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, excited delirium cases, shooting cases, mistaking a cell phone for a gun, restraint cases. I've defended the Portland Police, the Seattle Police, the King County Sheriff's, State Patrol, many different agencies. And it's been a real honor and a pleasure. I am defending an officer now in Tacoma, and I've defended the Tacoma Police Department, who's charged. I have my first officer charged with a crime in my whole career. He's charged with manslaughter in what's claimed to be like a Derek Chauvin case, which it isn't, but it's publicly been claimed to be that kind of a restraint case. And, it's just a whole different world now. I mean, as I'm sure you well know far more than I do, but over all the years that I've represented police officers, I've never had a jury on liability decide against a police officer. That says a lot, not about me. It says a lot about them, about the police, here, and how well they've, upheld their duties and done their jobs. And it's a pretty thankless job, as a lot of times. And I'm always on the side of the cop. You guys, police are amazing.
Yeah, well, and I thank you very much, first of all, on behalf of all the men in blue in the country. Just as you talked about responding out to officer-involved shootings, I don't think a lot of the public understands that when an officer is involved in a shooting, and I'm talking not even one that's questionable, clear cut, suspect gets out of the car, points it down at the cop, and the cop shoots the guy. There is a criminal investigation that is done.
Mm-hmm.
It is treated as a criminal investigation. And so we do have representation, a lawyer that goes up out there. Oftentimes, if they're part of a union, you have a union rep that's with you.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And so that's from the get go. When you go in to make your first statement, you're going to give the investigators that show up a general synopsis of, hey, I stopped the car, the guy got out with a gun, I defended myself, a blank thing, so they know what to investigate and how to work oftentimes. But as far as sitting down and going through the details of everything like that, you're going to have a lawyer present with you when you sit down for that very reason. And then the case is sent over to the district attorney's office, and then the DA's office obviously decides if there's going to be charges filed. And that's so important for officers in any deadly force encounter, or someone that suffers injury or anything like that, to have representation.
And we used to do, when I first started doing this, I would go to the scene, I would sit down with my officer alone, and we used to go to the lineup room and do a debrief. This is how it started back in the day. And the head of homicide would stand up and do like diagrams for everybody, like, what do you know? What do you know? My officer usually wouldn't speak. I'd tell him not to until we heard everything, did anything. And then it's really evolved to a pretty antiseptic, as kind of way of dealing with things. The inquests out here are the review for recommendation to the prosecutor. They've just now had a Supreme Court case come down that's really changed a lot of things with those, but at least it's a transparent public hearing for testimony about the shooting or use of deadly force, that the public gets to hear the who, what, where, when, how. Chauvin didn't have that. Most police cases that are public and high profile don't have that, but I highly recommend that kind of a process, that we air out the facts, and that there's representation in the case for everybody. And that, I think, goes a long way towards public confidence in deadly use of force cases.
Right, because you're just presenting the facts. Here's what happened.
Exactly.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. Here's what happened. And then if you draw something different from that, so be it. But this is what's happened. I really like transparency. That's the best way to go.
Yeah, that's just perfect. And the other thing is, it is different now, and we haven't had an inquest since they changed the law. So we'll see how that goes. But what I've described is the way it has been.
Do you find that the police departments that you represent are pretty progressive in the way that they do things? I mean, Portland's pretty much known for being pretty progressive.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's
have you ever watched Portlandia?
I have seen that. It's pretty funny. I have been to Portland several times, and it's an interesting place. So it's different than Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's for sure. We don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that's here.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, you also spoke earlier that you just finished defending the Seattle past police chief. Is this correct?
Right. I've represented her. I still represent her, but I represented her. She was the first African-American female chief in our city. So I represented her when she was hired. And then she resigned during the protests, and what we had was the CHOP zone, the autonomous zone here in Seattle, because the city council decided, in a defunding effort, to basically reduce her salary and to take over a lot of her discretionary decision-making process. That was her view. And so she decided to resign. She's doing a lot of other things now. She has a book out. She's an analyst for MSNBC and NBC. But when she resigned, the city, I can see the city out my window here, the buildings lit up with lights that said, like, love Carmen. Her name's Carmen Best. People love her. Yeah.
Why? And I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sure our listeners are too. Why would you be representing her when she was hired? Is that part of the hiring process?
No, it wasn't. It was kind of a convoluted process, but she was not one of the three finalists. And then she was one of the three finalists. I'll just say that. It was something that that I helped her on, and she became the chief. And I've been with the Seattle Police for so many years defending them. I don't do as much as I do now because that went back to the city attorney's office. We've had wonderful chiefs, but I think she's been, one of the most popular. and loved. People love her, and the police, the guild loved her. The police guild and the Seattle police officers did as well. And she came in through the ranks. She started, patrol and came up to the ranks and became chief.
Yeah, just from within the departments, anybody who does it that way, someone who's done the job. I mean, there are guys, men and women, on the department that know how to test well. They know how to promote well.
Mm-hmm.
They rise the ranks because some of them just want to be in that position. Some of them want the pension money or whatever it may be. But those aren't the guys that get the respect. And it is the people that have kind of grinded their way through it and put their time in at the different, levels. They've been involved in lots of different things on their department, investigations, patrol, and so forth. And you will always have the respect of, the officers within the department if you've risen the ranks that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know the job.
You know the job.
You know what the job entails.
Right.
Well, you, besides being the champion of police everywhere, you also have worked on some pretty high-profile cases, which we alluded to. One of them that really caught my fancy was the Amanda Knox story. Can you tell us a little bit about that story and how you were involved in that?
Yeah, she was from Seattle, so she was tried for murder in Italy. This was in Perugia, kind of a medieval town. She was there as an exchange student from the University of Washington. She was accused of killing a roommate. I think the probable cause that they used, and I know they've said this to arrest her, was that they said she did cartwheels in the police station. She shot for lingerie. She had pizza for dinner, and she kissed her boyfriend on camera. She was, in their view, odd. They thought she was not appropriate in how she dealt with this death of a roommate. She was tried, I call it triple jeopardy. Was it 3 times? 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Tried once, convicted. Tried twice, acquitted. She came home, and then they tried her a 3rd time in absentia. And then it went up to their highest court, the Court of Assisi in Italy, and she was exonerated. There was no evidence of her in that house, no evidence of her in the crime. There were 2 pieces of physical evidence. There was a knife and a bra clasp. The knife was the experts, they had independent experts that the court hired in the trial where she was acquitted, said that the evidence on both of those items was compromised, contaminated, and inadmissible. Didn't match Meredith, didn't match the wounds, the knife. Bra clasp had 7 or 8 items of different people's DNA, including a trace of Raffaele, her boyfriend. That bra clasp had not been collected for, I think it was 40 some odd days. We have the films from the crime scene. We called it Fellini forensics, kind of tongue in cheek, but it went from white to black, from being pushed around in the dirt, picked up, dropped, handled by different, forensic folks. That's why it was found to be, contaminated and compromised. They were actually were erasing in some of the footage. It looked like they were erasing like bloody footprints or handprints, not collecting the evidence. Like, are they scrubbing that down? All kinds of, violations in terms of protocol for examination of crime scenes and collection of evidence. And she never confessed. They said she did. They said to her, imagine, in Italian, by the way, she didn't speak Italian. Imagine if you were there, what would you have done? And she said, I would have covered my ears if I heard screaming. They translated that as I was there and I covered my ears. The prosecutor called her a she-devil. This was a ritualistic sex slang. It was a satanic cult, and that Amanda was the leader. No evidence of that. He was prosecuted for abuse of office in the middle of this trial and convicted. His name was Minini. I recommend the Netflix film, Amanda Knox. It lays all of this out. It has 3 people in it: the prosecutor, a tabloid reporter, Nick Pisa from the Daily Mail, and Amanda. A total travesty, this case.
And
she's home now.
Yeah, but she was incarcerated for how long?
7 years.
Jeez.
7 years.
The whole time in a foreign prison.
In Italy. Yeah, it was, it's really hard to believe that she went through all that. It's hard to believe that she's even here, and she just had a baby, and she's married, and she's involved in a lot of exoneree innocent projects all around the country and even in Italy. You would think she would be like under her covers, never getting out of bed. I mean, the PTSD, the emotional trauma, the international media spotlight, and the vilification of her, you know, calling her a she-devil and a temptress in court, in the media.
And how did she get, after she was convicted on the first one, how was she able to get a second trial that ended up being, you said, acquitted?
Well, because they don't have double jeopardy in Italy. They don't. So you could try her like they did 3 times.
Yeah.
3 times. Trying her after she was acquitted. And on extradition, when she was convicted on the 3rd trial, after being convicted on the 2nd trial, they could have extradited her. She was home in the US by then, because there was no defense basically on double jeopardy under the treaties between the US and Italy. And then the only other defense is that she's innocent. I mean, was how a lot of experts viewed it. Well, the court didn't find she was innocent, did they? So you've got the problem. Would the United States refuse to allow her to be extradited? And legally, you know, given the 2 treaties, it was going to be a difficult fight. But by then, she'd been exonerated by the highest court, the Court of Assisi. And they said there were huge errors in the case. And it was not just an acquittal, it was a complete exoneration.
Well,
We don't have that in the US either.
what was the role did the State Department play in all of this?
Not much. They didn't do much. I mean, I had a really great group here. We called ourselves the Friends of Amanda Knox. We had a judge. He's a retired judge now. We had forensic scientists. We had ex-law enforcement. We had even an author who had written about this prosecutor. And, you know, the whole group worked really hard, not only in looking at the science and looking at the evidence and everything else in this case, but in trying to reach out to the State Department, trying to reach out to, you know, even the president. The only one that came out and said anything public on her behalf was Donald Trump before he became a president. I don't know if you remember that, but he came out and said, boycott Italy. This woman's innocent and she should be home. Not that she embraced that, but he's the only one that, you know, publicly came out and others did that were in the media, like Bill O'Reilly did, Geraldo Rivera did, Nancy Grace did for a time, Anderson Cooper did, you know, the New York
I have
Times
to go to the
did. A
restroom, so
lot
we're
of
going to
people
plug in a
came out
commercial right here.
supporting Amanda Knox and saying she was innocent. The State Department, as far as I know, as far as my experience, was not truly helpful.
Well, that also speaks to kind of our attention span for media nowadays. I mean,
Right.
if a case can last a couple of weeks in the news, it's got some staying power, you know. I mean, most of the time we're on to the next horrible crime that's committed or the next horrible case that's committed. There you go, drinking Rainier, and we're drinking these. My goodness, that's just.
Yeah, it's
No, I
brutal.
just thought it'd make you jealous.
I like Rainier. That's pretty good beer.
It's
When
good
you're in
beer.
Washington, you have to have that. But
That or Olympia beer, but
that's the thing, that how that case happened how long ago, and I mean I still remember it like it was yesterday.
2007.
13, 14 years ago, almost 15.
Right, but she wasn't brought home until 2011, and then she was convicted again after that. So it's been ongoing for, you know, a span of, I think it was about a decade.
Well, the thing is too is you would think the State Department would kind of protect this young lady a little bit, you know. I mean, at some point we should have the State Department should have a little loyalty to its citizens and kind of
Right.
try to help them. I think that's what the State Department's for, correct? It's kind of to help with
Correct.
those four
Yeah,
they come up.
and no, go ahead. I agree completely.
But yet they were lacking in this case. They weren't there to be seen.
No, and I think there was a lot of criticism of our efforts in Amanda's case, saying that we were critical of Italy. And I'm not critical of Italy. We weren't. I mean, they've got an older system than ours. I mean, they came up with the Renaissance in Italy, and the Roman law is older than, you know, British common law. Our system's based on British common law. But we had a rogue prosecutor in this case, like the Duke Lacrosse case, Mike Nifong, and he went to jail for that and got disbarred. Very similar kind of prosecutor. But there was one where he was out of control and nobody's checked him, nobody stopped him. The only thing that stopped him were, you know, the courts ultimately after many years.
Yeah, that's I have a little experience.
Yeah,
about
you
some
do.
bad road
How was that?
prosecutors, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah, we had a corruption investigation that went on here in Tulsa. We don't have enough time in this podcast, but
Oh,
we had some officers that were investigated, and there was, prosecutor that it was a federal investigation that, without a doubt, they overstepped some things that were just wrong. Just plain and simple. There were some cops that were doing some things wrong, but then once every bad guy basically heard, hey, if you can just make an allegation against a police officer, we'll dismiss what charges
right.
you have, or if you're in prison, we're going to let you out. And
Yeah.
it just opened the floodgates, and pretty soon it was just, officers' names were getting trashed. I do have a question.
Terrible.
Yeah, it was a bad deal. We've only got 5 or 6 minutes left, Ann. But being from the Seattle area, there was does the name John Kivlin ring a bell? He was a Bellevue police officer not that long ago. I'm talking just a few years ago. And he was accused. There was a woman that he was married. He was having an affair with a woman. And she made allegations for like rape or physical abuse against him. But then she also made him against a police chief out there
Hmm.
in that area, and then another officer, like 3 different officers. And this woman, she ended up, she was from another country, and she was married, and she had fled. I had written a book about the corruption deal I was referring to.
Okay,
I
I'm
went
gonna
through
read it.
myself. And John Kivlin was actually, this officer was from Bellevue, Washington, and I think he actually got arrested originally by King County Sheriff's Department. When this happened just a few years ago, all charges against him were dropped, but his story is actually in the book. I interviewed him and got to talk to him about that as well. Does that sound
You know,
familiar to you about that?
it does. It does. And I remember that he was pretty steadfast, right, in terms of his innocence, even though it was smeared all over the place,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? And he actually, going back to what we kind of talked about earlier in our podcast tonight, he ended up losing his job because he ran her license plate. He met her through, like online. They met through some dating app or something like that. They were both married, and she was lying about her name, and he wanted to know who she really was when they first started seeing her, and he ran her license plate and found out who she really was. And they ended up continuing this long, like legit affair. But he had told her, yeah, I ran your license plate and figured it out. And then when it got to the point where he wanted to basically break it off with her, she came forward, told the police department he had physically assaulted her, that he had,
Right.
these type of things. And then she said, hey, he ran my license plate. And of course, there was a record of it. And so he all the criminal charges ended up being dropped against him, but he lost his job
Over that.
because of he ran.
Wow.
Yeah, he lost it. Lost his job.
In healthcare, we call that a HIPAA violation.
That's exactly what it is.
That's a HIPAA violation.
Yeah.
Can't do that.
Yeah, but yeah, that his interview in there is kind of, and like I said, once she started making accusations against the police chief, all these other officers as well, and they found out that she had made allegations in other jurisdictions against cops. She liked to find cops online. She was married, and she started these sexual relationships with them, and then would make accusations against them.
Is she a badge bunny?
I've never heard that term before. That's good.
You've never heard badge bunny? No, that's
No.
that's it. It's a groupie for cops. That's the term, a badge bunny.
Okay.
Education. You're Stanford education, and we've got this Oklahoma,
I know.
little stuff
Dire.
right here. So
I got to hang with you guys more. You're gonna learn
Yeah.
a lot.
we're fun.
As long as you bring
Yeah.
beer, because we're having this. Well, and it's been a real pleasure having you. If anybody needs a great lawyer, you're the one. You're a super lawyer. I'm sure you're very busy. I know that you have tons of things going out there, but if you'd like to plug anything, we have as much time as you'd like.
Oh no, thank you. I just want to thank you guys. You've just been so delightful. I've had a wonderful time. It's been a real honor and a pleasure.
Well, we appreciate it, man. We like people who protect the police.
Yeah, seriously, big fan. Much appreciation.
Thank you.
As you kind of talked about, things have changed for those of us in this profession right now, and long as officers, I think, are following policies and procedures and laws and things like that, and have competent attorneys like yourself that are out there looking out for cops, as long as they're doing the right thing, everything will be okay.
Amen.
Here's to you, ma'am.
thank you.
Cheers.
Enjoy your
Cheers.
beer. We finish these crappy things.
Thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you.
wonderful.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.